what is your level of being stunned by what is happening with the Cardinals in 2023? It's one thing to have a disappointing record, maybe slip slide in a couple games under 500, but the state of this baseball team, do you ever stop and just go, am I really watching this?
What's amazing is not just the losses, but the different ways in which they've happened. And if there's like a tracker going on, it's how many times players, and I'm sure the fans and management and front office have thought, okay, this is the bottom, right? This has got to be it. It's gonna turn around. And it feels like every time you think that, another loss comes along. Like it felt like that after Tuesday night's loss, and then Wednesday happened, and it was worse. And it really is stunning is a good word, just because there aren't any other ones out there. But I mean, that one, the losses this week to the Giants really have just been demoralizing. I mean, at least to the fan base. Obviously, you look at Twitter, and because of location and algorithms and stuff, every single thing that's trending on the right side of my Twitter homepage is either Marmol or Mosaic or Schilt, right? Even Matheny sometimes, because everyone's talking about, what should happen there. So it's frustrating, being in the clubhouse and talking with Marmol and listening to him talk before and after games. There's a level of frustration that has not been in that ballpark, at least not for the same reasons, in a long, long time.
And I don't know. Well, I do. Listen, we do know how they can at least get better. Which would be doing a better job hitting with men in scoring position. That's certainly a big one. They're just the worst team at doing that since May the 22nd. But other than that, and of course, also players, kind of fulfilling the talent they have, playing up to the talent rather than playing down. And there's a few guys that applies to. They got to get Nolan Gorman going. I mean, Contreras got to get him going. We can identify those things, but I don't know that they got enough pitching even now. The starting pitching's better, but can we trust it entirely? The bullpen's really collapsing. And it's to your point, even when the starting pitching starts to improve, the bullpen blows up. So it's like, where do you turn? It's every day. I'm sort of repeating you, and I apologize, but it's like every day it's something different. So how do they put a consistent performance together where they're pretty much doing okay, no worse than like okay in all these areas?
Yeah, it starts with, Nolan Arenado was, I guess, talking with some reporters yesterday, and he said, it starts with execution. He said, we haven't been good enough as players, and he's right. He's struggled at the plate. He hasn't been as good defensively as we've become accustomed to. You look at the bullpen, and it feels like you said, every time a starter has a good game, it turns around and somebody in the bullpen gives it up. And it's been an equal opportunity thing. It's not like you can point your finger and say, okay, these three guys have been the biggest problem, and if they can turn it around, really, quite honestly, aside from Paul Goldschmidt, and I guess Jordan Montgomery, probably, everyone can look at what they've done and said, okay, here's like 10 ways we could each individually be better. And I think when you're trying to get that many things going, I think a lot of this goes back to the way that the roster was constructed in the offseason and areas that they did not address and things that they hoped would work out, and just kind of going in with so many outfielders, right? Too many outfielders, and then you're expecting Brendan Donovan to be better than he was when he played really well last year. You look across that whole, you look at the baseball reference page, and the number of guys with the OPS plus of 100 or lower is a little stunning, right? Because
Right.
Obviously, but OPS plus of 100 is league average, and they've got a lot of guys that are worse. Even Tommy Edman. Everybody loves Tommy Edman, and he's a super valuable piece on a playoff-type contender, but his OPS plus this year is 91, right? So everybody is kind of lagging behind where they wanted to be. It's not for a lack of want, and it's not for a lack of trying to be better, but, it is just not happening. And I think the fact that the NL Central is as winnable as it's ever been, that just makes it worse because the carrot that they're trying to chase is staying steady, and they just keep slipping back. It's not like the carrot is going a million miles an hour in front of them.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I know it's too early. No decisions have to be made, and people talk about the trade deadline, and it's going to be really interesting from a St. Louis perspective. But realistically, that trade window for notable deals, for major deals, substantial deals, that window's not going to open for a while. It's not like you can do it,
right.
Go out there and do it tomorrow or whatever. They sure look like sellers at this point, unless something dramatic happens. But even if it does it mean that the Cardinals will be ready to roll in the postseason? I would say no. So they may end up, in kind of a seller's mode. It just depends to what extent. What do you think? Who do you think would be who would have appeal on the open market if the Cardinals were to put some names out there?
Everybody. That's
right.
Like they've got players that should be better, right? I think if you're looking at the players who are quote unquote untouchable or who they'd have to be bowled over, the list is pretty short. I mean, it just really is. I know there's been a lot of talk about Paul Goldschmidt, and I get that. I would be surprised to see that happen for a number of reasons. But I think when you're looking at obviously the starters who are free agents next year, and Jack Flaherty and Jordan Montgomery. I think when you look at the bullpen pieces in the back, and even though Gallegos and Helsley and Hicks have had their issues, they're still the types of arms that teams would love to have, right? And I think when you look at guys who can bring some versatility, maybe in the field, those types of players are craved by contenders, as Cardinal fans know, because those are the types of guys that they've always had, have been big parts of the teams that have made the postseason. So, look, there aren't a lot of pieces that should be nailed down. And I'm not saying it should be a fire sale where they trade every single person other than 5 or 6 guys, but they need to at least listen. And I think, you look at the other teams that are around them in the overall standings, they're a little bit behind the Nationals and Rockies, and you don't hear anybody asking about whether they should sell, right? Or whether they should trade and make improvements. So, and it's at some point, and I think that point is sooner than later, they're going to have to make a decision on who's going to be a part of the plan for 2024. And if the person is not high in that equation, they need to at least listen. And look, I've long been a proponent of making trades whenever you can in June and early July and not waiting. Sometimes you can get more kind of set the market instead of reacting to the market. So, if things keep going the way they are over the next, really week or two, I'm not even talking about the All-Star break, but before that, you kind of got to get to that point where you might have to make some decisions and not be afraid to make some moves.
No doubt about it. Our friend Ryan Fagan from the Sporting News, MLB senior writer. You can follow him on Twitter at Ryan Fagan. Who you got this weekend? You talk about an intriguing series, Cardinals at Mets. At least the Cardinals aren't spending $270 million for the record that they have. Gosh, I am surprised. Look, I know there's some injuries, but I am definitely surprised that the Mets are having such a hard time. But what's their upside?
Absolutely.
What's their upside? Because you got older pitchers, you got pitching injuries. They don't have Alonso. What do you think, practically speaking, what is the Mets' realistic ceiling to get to from where they are?
Well, the thing with the Mets, and it's a little bit different from the Cardinals, is you look, if they can somehow limp into that third wild card spot, and when they do it, Verlander and Scherzer are healthy. That's it's still, they're not, they've shown this year they're not what they have been in terms of the reliable workhorse guys who are going to make 33 starts and have an ERA of 2.5, right? They're not that, but they've also shown that they can still go out and pitch 6 dominating innings, right? So if you're the Mets, that's what you're holding on to. And you know, if Alonso's healthy and Nimmo's leading off and, Lindor gets back on track, there's still a team that can win in the postseason and can win a couple rounds in the postseason. it's not the same for the Cardinals. So the upside for the Mets is a little bit higher. I think the level of frustration is not quite equal with Mets fans, but it's higher than I think any other fan base outside of maybe San Diego in the National League right now, because it's been just a series of mind-boggling issues that, if you're writing the script for the 2023 season and you turned the Mets script in for what it's been so far, it would get rejected because it's just been a little ridiculous.
And what do you think of Jordan Walker since he returned?
I think he's been good. I'm not sure he's been everything. You watch in the outfield and it's obvious he's still learning that position. So there have been some times where I think that is clouded. This is a guy that's still making contact. He's swinging and missing a little bit, but he's overall been pretty good. I think we've seen guys come up. We saw what Ellie De La Cruz did. We've seen what guys like, Tatis Jr. and Acuna Jr. and Soto did right away, and it almost became like that's what was expected. But I think you look at, like Julio Rodriguez last year. He came up and he wasn't great the first month. He got a chance to adjust, and then he went on to do great things. So I think, you give him that chance. I like what he's been. I like what he's going to do. I almost feel bad for him that, his debut season has just kind of had a cloud over it from day one. But I still think he's a guy who, he's the type of guy you can still build around. I know it hasn't been maybe the exact start that he and the organization had hoped for, but, my expectations long term for him haven't changed at all.
Ryan Hagan from the Sporting News, and I did want to, if you don't mind, I don't think you do, because I want to bring everyone's attention to it. The thing that you asked me to just add to with some comments about the St. Louis Immortals. So, but tell us what the Sporting News is planning, and it hasn't dropped yet, I don't believe, but it's probably getting fairly close.
It's still a little bit away, but yeah.
Yeah, tell us what this project's about. And what people should know about it. To me, it sounds like a heck of a lot of fun. I was pleased that you asked me to, have a minor speaking role in this from the St. Louis standpoint. But tell us all about it. I think it's cool.
Yeah, it's kind of you look at like the best professional athletes from team sports from each city. And when we did the first round of it, we did it back in the winter, and we did the cities that currently had like the big four sports teams in the NHL and NBA and NFL and MLB. And we had so much fun with it, internally and externally, the debate it created and the engagement, it was a lot of fun for everybody involved. So we decided to do a second round. And this time we're going with cities that have at least 3 currently or have had all 4 at some point for extended stretches. And obviously, the St. Louis doesn't have the NFL right now, but, the Rams had a long run, the Cardinals had a long run, and the St. Louis Hawks had a long run in the NBA. So, you're looking at the best 4 players in that history. And when you look at some cities, it's been a stretch to find 4 guys who feel worthy. That, as we talked about with St. Louis, you've got no doubt first ballot Hall of Famers who aren't even making the conversation because there's so much quality and so many great players who have called St. Louis home and played here for a long time that it's a fun debate. When you get down to it, it's kind of easy to select the 4 that we went with, but it's not that there aren't other guys who wouldn't have been easy choices for other cities.
Did Stan the Man make the cut?
Dan did make the cut.
Oh,
Dan
man.
did make the cut.
I'm sorry to force you to give that away. No, I'm just kidding.
So that one's not a whole lot of a tough one to come up with, yeah.
Well, as I was telling you on the phone that day, of course the Cardinals have historically dominated this landscape for just about a century, and
yeah,
so many immortal players, so many great players. It is difficult to even just select 4 Cardinals and leave other illustrious Cardinals out. But then the part that has always been a little bit of a special cause of mine, I know that NFL football in St. Louis didn't have a lot of success. It was like 8 playoff seasons and 49 combined years between the Cardinals and Rams. But St. Louis actually has, in terms of, if you talk about great players and coaches, you you got Deardorff, Larry Wilson, Jackie Smith, Roger Worley, Don Coryell in the Hall of Fame. You have Kurt Warner, Orlando Pace, Marshall Faulk, Aeneas Williams, Isaac Bruce, Dick Vermeil in the Hall of Fame. I mean, it's that's a lot of Hall of Fame. Yeah, I know, that's right. And Torrey Holt, I think, will be there at some point. That's a lot. That is a treasure of talent for a couple of franchises that really didn't win a lot here. And of course, Bob Pettit is. I don't even know what to say about him because this guy, at the time he retired, was. If you were going to put together at that time like a top 5 list of the best NBA players in history, he would have been on that list. And people might say, "What are you talking?" No, he would have been on that list at that time. In the decades that have passed since his retirement, he's gotten a little lost, and I understand why. But the hockey. There's been so many great Blues players. I mean, I could go on and on. It's been, and of course, this is the cradle of American soccer. So we've been very, very fortunate. We've been privileged, and the generations of St. Louis sports fans have been very privileged and very pleased and very honored to have witnessed all of this great talent in all of these sports. So, I don't envy the job of selecting only 4. But that's good for St. Louis because that just shows you we have a really rich sports history.
Yeah, we thought about putting Wayne Gretzky on there for his 10 minutes in town, but we opted against it. So. Well,
text me or something because you know me, my brain's going in all different directions. But please shoot me a text or give me a call or an email or something when this project's about to be unrolled at the Sporting News Online, and because I want to dig into it. I want to make sure our listeners read it, and then we can have then everyone can start to debate, right? And I also want to see what you do with a lot of other cities as well. It's really cool. So good luck with the go ahead. Sorry.
There's some of them that have been a little more contentious than St. Louis, but that's part of the fun, right? Like I said, some of them it's like you're trying to find places for 4 inner circle guys, and some of them you're trying to is this guy really deserve to be there? So that's what makes it kind of fun. St. Louis is definitely not in that category.
Well, Ryan Fagan, keep up the great work. SportingNews.com is phenomenal. Love all the writers. Everybody does a good job. You guys work your tails off, and yet you maintain the high quality. So, and I think people need to go to SportingNews.com because if you haven't visited SportingNews.com in a long time, if it's been too long since your last visit, I mean, they got you all covered. I mean, every sport, but also, wagering advice, if you will, handicapping different sports with different results. It's all there. So Ryan Fagan is a big part of it. Thank you, man. Till next time, be well.
Sounds good, man. Appreciate it.
That's our friend Ryan Fagan. Well, who would you have, Jim Hewer? I'll put you on the spot, man. See, we can get our people texted in now. I think I know who they are, so I don't want to give anything away.
These are overall sports, as I understand it.
Oh
correct?
Yeah.
So that makes it that much harder. Stan Musial's one.
Yeah.
On the list, hands down. I'm going to have to put Pujols in that list for me.
Yeah. You got a certain right-handed pitcher. I ain't talking about.
Gibson's got to be on there.
Yeah.
So now we're down to 1, right?
That's 3. And so you have all of these other great Cardinals, right?
Yes.
And you've got Bob Pettit, and you've got any number of choices you could make. Like, let's just say, we're just going to throw out names, like a Kurt Warner or a. Dan Deardorff or a Larry Wilson then you move on to hockey, and you've got Brett Hall would be a strong candidate,
right?
And who and I'm not being ignorant here because I'm aware of Blues history, but who would be and really like inner circle top 4 St. Louis team athlete. Well, it doesn't have to be a team athlete.
Right.
It could be Jackie Joyner-Kersee.
There's another name. That's another great name.
I mean, if you, but what other Blues? Like, if you would, and no one has to put Hall first. I'm not saying that. Who would be next?
I think Hall goes first, but then, I mean, are we going to go, and like I go, wow, Al McKinnis was one of the all-timers, but he didn't play his entire career here, so does he qualify for that? Chris Pronger's another name, but then he had great success as he left here. Bernie Federko's got to be close on that list. He played except for that one season in Detroit, he was on that list. My goodness, Bernie, you're getting my mind going.
It's hard, man.
I don't know who I want to go with that last one. I mean, it might be Dan Dierdorf.
Here's my general philosophy on that. St. Louis loves the Cardinals. Generations have loved the Cardinals, and Cardinals fans are all over the region, just not St. Louis, just not Metro East, just not the state of Missouri. And the Cardinals have been, we use these words, but it's true. It's really an iconic franchise. So I think it's got to be top-heavy with Cardinals, as I believe. I'd be stunned if it's not. It's just a fact. So if you look at it this way, okay, what would be second in line? If you want, there's no charity picks here. Like if you believe the Blues should be represented, then you ask, because the Blues are very dear to St. Louis. I mean, they're so much a fabric of the community, and I'm not in any way demeaning what those great St. Louis football Cardinals did or what the Greatest Show Rams did. Mm-hmm. I mean, I pushed to get all these guys in the Hall of Fame when I was on that committee. But it's a little different because the Blues have been here from the beginning, and they've been through thick and thin, through financial turmoil, through good times and bad, and just constant chaos there for a while. I mean, the Blues have been a very, very, very special part of the St. Louis sports community. Now, you wouldn't put a Blues player on that list if he wasn't worthy of being on that list. Like, you don't put Brett Hall on, for example, if it means, leaving, Pujols out or something,
right,
which would never happen, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
But I would maintain that Brett Hall is worthy of it.
I do too.
Yeah.
We got a texter. He texted in immediately. Stan, Albert, Gibby at Hall. It wasn't even like a debate for him.
Who did he have? You talked too fast.
Stan, Albert, Gibby, and Brett Hall.
I mean, that would sound that
I couldn't argue with that.
That would be one that I would say, yep, I'll rubber stamp that. My one regret, not regret, and I'm not like incensed about it. As I mentioned to Ryan, it's such a damn shame that Bob Pettit has gotten lost in history, even St. Louis sports history. It's really a damn shame. But as I was telling Ryan Fagan today that he wanted to get me to comment on some of this, there are some markets out there where I think he just said there's going to be, it's not easy to find for. You could build yourself about 3 Mount Rushmores conservatively for St. Louis sports. There's just so many names. I mean, my goodness. I mean, you do a Mount Rushmore, and let's just say a Kurt Warner doesn't make the cut. I mean, you got a lot of great choices, right?
Yes.
And I'm not saying, by the way, he made the cut or didn't make the cut. I'm just speaking hypothetically, right?
Yeah. I mean, Warner, my favorite player during that time, just as a fan, was Isaac Bruce. He's a Hall of Famer. I think we all think of him as a St. Louis Ram, for sure. I don't know if I can put him on the list. One other name. I'm leaving Ozzie out of the conversation.
I know,
it's
right?
It's like, whoa, wait a minute. This is the all-time greatest defensive shortstop, and what he did offensively and what he became was what he meant to the team and the franchise and the city. I'm like, how can I leave him off of the list?
That sets up an interesting discussion, and I'm not going back on what I said. Listen, I think if this thing comes out and Brett Hall is on it, I would agree and approve. Not that anybody cares what I think, but if you get down to who had the most magnitude during the career, and Brett Hall had a hell of a lot of magnitude, and he took blues hockey to a much higher level. He also influenced generations of kids, and you see him all over the NHL now. I mean, Brett Hall had played a huge role in that. He made hockey more popular than it's ever been. I mean, the new arenas, the downtown arena is not there without Brett Hall. So that's a hell of a lot of magnitude. But when you look at what Ozzie Smith did, I mean, that career is pretty phenomenal because it included a World Series championship and a couple other National League pennants. And he's actually the greatest at what he did in the history of baseball, playing defense at shortstop. And so, I mean, that's what's so tricky about this. But I also think, you know, it would be wrong to shortchange the Blues.
Right.
You know, all due respect, if it's like, well, and Bernie Federico's a friend of mine. Oh, Bernie Federico should be on there. Let's be honest. Again, there's so many. No, he wouldn't be a guy that you would find on there. You could say that about a lot of really great Blues players, but they're not top 4 in the history of St. Louis sports. But there are so many others. I mean, it's not easy to do to cut that squad down to 4. You know,
yeah,
it just isn't.
It really is. There's a texter says, "I love Kurt, but could they have one without Marshall on that list?"
Well, that's a great point.
You
Again,
know?
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. And it's, at some point you're going to have NBA guys to consider. I mean, I don't think the late great JoJo White would be in that group, but he was a stellar Hall of Fame NBA player, and you got all these guys now in there. So, but I don't know that they would take just because a guy is from St. Louis. I think it's more about St. Louis teams. So I'll rescind what I just said. But I'm just pointing out, when you include those guys, all these. St. Louis very underrated presence in the NBA through the years.
I'm probably going to go with Hull as that last person, and kind of for the same reasons you brought up. He had more influence on the game staying here and thriving than any player in the history of that franchise.
He did.
That's the bottom line here with that. I know there are people who are frustrated with him when he left or this or that. He influenced that organization unlike any player that has ever played in that organization, because even when he was scoring goals, and I've said this on the air a number of times, when he was playing, they didn't win a Stanley Cup, and they didn't get to the conference finals or anything like that. But it could have been a game in the middle of January, and everybody wanted to know about Brett Hull. It wasn't whether they won or lost. It was, hey, did Hull score? And if he scored, it was like, that is the greatest thing in the world. I love watching that guy score. He had more influence on this town as a player, and I probably have to put him on that list. But, man, it's hard to keep others off. There's another texter says, hey, I was lucky to see Bob Pettit, and he was absolutely great here.
I'll have to look up something on him, and I've written about him, so I should probably just do a Google search where he stood in the history of the NBA at the time that he retired. See, because you can't take his career and put it into the context of
today,
all the stuff that happened. That's just not fair to him.
Right.
He was a dominant, feared, consistently great NBA player, and he led the St. Louis Hawks to an NBA championship. They beat the Boston Celtics, those Celtics, and also got him to the NBA Finals several times. I mean, I think when he retired, he might have been – again, I'll look it up. I think when he retired, I think he was like the all-time rebounding leader in the NBA, and he was right there in scoring as well. I mean, his not just the quality of his play, but the quantity of all the valuable, meaningful things he did. He was a great, great, great player. And I give the NBA people that select these things – when they did the top 50 of all time back in the early 90s, he made that, and they updated that and expanded on it, and he's still there. So at least the NBA has not forgotten him. And I remember being in Cleveland for the All-Star game when they announced that top 50 of all time, and I was thrilled that Pettit was there, and I was thrilled to spend some time with him, and I was also thrilled to hear what some of the all-time great players had to say about him, who competed against him, including Bill Russell. I think I've mentioned this before, but just a quick side note. Other than, listen, in the competitive arena, like when you have, guys still playing and all that, and you go into a stadium or an arena and you see all this talent, That doesn't count because that's in the competitive field. That's in the actual live competition. When you talk about, I've never seen this much talent in one place. I'm going to tell you, I've never seen as much talent in one place at this big ballroom on a Friday afternoon before the NBA All-Star Game in Cleveland. I have never seen so much talent amassed in one place than that huge ballroom. It was just ridiculous. I mean, I look over there. It's Wilt Chamberlain, and then you look. Oh, hey, look at that. Oh, there's Bill Russell, and I mean, just I could go on and on and on. Oh man, there's the Big O, Oscar Robertson.
That alone trumps everything. Wow, just those three. That's incredible.
And then of course some of the current players were good enough to be included on that list, including, needless to say, Michael Jordan. You look at all the great Celtics, the guys who were still alive, like that group had a pretty big representation. And George Mikan,
he was there.
He was the first huge star in the NBA. I'm talking about the late 40s and early 50s or whatever. He was the first big star. George Mikan was there. And I mean, it's just, I could not get over it. And it was actually good for me because when you cover sports for a while and you're traveling and it's all the hours, listen, I've always loved my job. Don't get me wrong. But it really takes something, at some point it takes something really extraordinary for you to just act like a little kid. Not act like a little kid as in me rushing up breathless and asking for an autograph, but just beaming like a little kid when you see all of these incredible players in one big room. It's just amazing.
That had to be awesome.
Yeah.
Just you describing, I'm going, oh my gosh. A big grin on my face, and I can only imagine yours probably as well being there. Look at this. Look at who's there. Look over there. Look here. Look there. I mean, that's – if you had – too bad we didn't have camera phones or somebody to take a picture of that night. My goodness. That would have been special.
Yeah, the NBA at 50. Let me see this if I got a minute. I'm sorry. I like this stuff, and I'm looking at this photo now, and I see Bob Pettit. Let me give you some of the names because I wanted to remember the people that I didn't mention. Kareem was there. Elgin Baylor was there. Larry Bird was there. Wilt was there. Bob Cousy was there. Dr. J was there, right? George Gervin was there. Elvin Hayes, one of my personal favorites, and Wes Unseld. John Havlicek, right? Magic Johnson, of course, right? Pete Maravich was there. Hakeem was there. Selfishly, one of my favorite players, they called him Black Jesus, Earl Monroe. The kids in Philadelphia, when he would show up at the playground, it's Black Jesus. It's Black Jesus. He's coming. And right on down the list, Willis Reed, the Big O, Bill Russell. I mean, Bill Walton, Jerry West, Lenny Wilkins, who had some time in St. Louis. I mean, I'm leaving off a bunch of guys. It was amazing. But just to see Wilt there and to see, Shaq there near Wilt and then all these other centers that I just name-checked, they're all in one ballroom, sitting in a chair, spread out on the floor,
That's the greatest collection of athletes in the history of the world.
And Wilt Chamberlain to this day, and I would think until the remainder of my days, this is the biggest human being I've ever seen. And I'm not talking about, there have been guys taller. I'm not talking about height. I'm just talking about he had the height. He was a 7-footer. He was 7'1", I believe. But just the massive size of his entire body, it was almost like scary. It's like, and I'm thinking, my goodness, how could you possibly defend this guy? Because it's just like, even in a chair, he was sitting in a chair and well into his years. He just had this intimidating presence that I'll never forget. It's like, I've never seen a human being this massive,
That's incredible.
A human being in shape. I'm not talking about big, blubbery guys like yours truly. I'm talking about prime shape, prime form athletes. Never saw anyone that big.